This chart tracks global employee engagement. The worldwide average dropped to 21%, with Europe at 13%. A secondary axis tracks the financial cost. In the United States, annual turnover costs reach $1 trillion, climbing as engagement falls. Behind these macroeconomic trends are individual workers searching for an exit. Nearly half of the global workforce is considering leaving their current positions, while quiet quitting, doing the bare minimum to stay employed, affects up to 40% of a typical organization. When professionals hit this level of exhaustion, they usually receive advice to either grit their teeth and work harder or hand in their resignation. Neither solution addresses the underlying cause of the friction. Person-environment fit theory suggests that chronic burnout correlates most strongly with a severe gap between the requirements of a role and the innate psychological wiring of the person trying to fill it. This $8.9 trillion crisis is an alignment problem. It represents the measurable cost of forcing workers into professional environments built for someone else's strengths. William Vander career spans 3 distinct worlds. He spent 15 years as a pastor, leading a congregation of over 6,000, transitioned into a human resources manager role at a Fortune 200 petroleum company, and eventually founded one of the nation's top executive recruiting firms. Over 15 years, his firm conducted more than 30,000 executive interviews. From that data, he developed the Vander Index, a proprietary framework that maps 12 distinct personality traits to specific career paths and high-performance work environments. The framework promises to cure burnout by identifying your exact psychological wiring and matching it to a role designed to reward those specific traits. This presents a specific trade-off. The tool offers concrete, plain English directives for career planning, but it is built on a single firm's proprietary observations rather than independent academic research. We have to decide if that clarity is worth the lack of scientific validation. This diagram outlines the architecture of the Vander Index. Users take an 80-question assessment and receive lists of best fit and worst fit careers. We can categorize the results into functional buckets, starting with the execution-focused traits highlighted here. The first execution type is the FAST. These individuals prioritize speed of response and quick decision-making, thriving in high-velocity environments like startups, emergency medicine, or sales. But that speed creates severe friction in the wrong environment. Place a fast worker inside a slow-moving, bureaucratic government administration or a long-term research team, and their defining strength produces deep frustration. Then there is the solver. This is a rare profile, representing only 1% of top performers. Solvers channel all their professional energy into overcoming obstacles, ignoring the temptation to dwell on the problems themselves. Their operating principle aligns with Dale Carnegie's advice to avoid criticism and complaining. They rebrand problems as possibilities, showing up to meetings with a proposed solution rather than a list of grievances. The final execution trait is the productive. These workers prioritize consistent, reliable output and energy management over flashy bursts of activity, fitting well in demanding fields like law, architecture, or surgery. If you test high in these execution traits, you are wired for high-level output. The persistent trade-off is a constant struggle with work-life balance and a deep resentment of micromanagement once a direction is set. The second category of workers focuses on planning and relational glue. The first trait here is the anticipator, someone who studies historical patterns to predict future needs and build strategies backward from the end goal. They operate like a veteran quarterback reading a defense. Aaron Rodgers doesn't just look for an open receiver, he anticipates the play developing before the snap. In an office setting, these workers always arrive with a backup plan already prepared. Next are the connected. These individuals build webs of genuine, reciprocal relationships by moving past small talk to focus on deep ideas. They generally give more to their network than they take from it. Michael J. Fox's advocacy work provides a model for this trait. He built a massive, mission-driven network to advance Parkinson's research by leveraging authentic connections rather than superficial networking tactics. Finally, there is the likable trait. In this framework, likability is a measure of emotional adjustment and low aggression. In building team cohesion, Vander argues that this trait consistently beats raw technical competence. Prioritizing these relational traits creates the essential cohesion teams need to function. However, success for these workers require roles in mediation or client-facing environments, where their emotional intelligence is the primary asset. To identify these traits, the framework utilizes aggressive filtering tactics. Vander late-night text test measures responsiveness by messaging candidates after hours to see who replies immediately. The intended outcome is ruthlessly efficient to weed out 99% of the applicant pool and isolate the hyper-responsive 1% who fit the fast profile. This tactic carries a heavy ethical trade-off. It explicitly violates standard professional boundaries to test an applicant's limits, and it lacks any published peer-reviewed validation. Contrast this with the Big Five personality model, which rests on decades of independent academic research. The Big Five uses scientifically verified traits to predict work engagement, rather than relying on subjective recruiting hacks. Adopting unvalidated screening tools risks selecting for toxic work habits or candidates who are already on the verge of burnout. This quadrant chart plots assessment tools based on academic rigor versus concrete actionability. For HR professionals requiring tools that withstand legal scrutiny and provide peer-reviewed data, the Big Five and Clifton Strengths remain the standard choice in this upper-left quadrant. Founders leading values-driven organizations often prioritize a shared vocabulary for culture over academic rigor. For them, this framework provides a useful language for spotting mismatches in a small team. For career pivoters, the Vander Index sits in this high actionability quadrant. It bypasses abstract psychological concepts to provide the exact, concrete career lists needed to plan a transition. The Vander Index functions as a translation layer, converting observed behavioral patterns into the specific, plain English directives needed for career planning. The utility of these 12 traits depends entirely on how accurately you see yourself. If you cannot identify your blind spots, the remaining data cannot provide a reliable path forward. If you are currently stuck in a misaligned role, use these trait profiles to negotiate. Request specific projects or team assignments that match your identified strengths, making your current routine manageable while you plan a long-term exit. Ignoring your natural wiring leads to inevitable friction, but relying solely on your personality type produces its own set of risks. Success without alignment produces inevitable burnout, but alignment without effort produces mediocrity. Use this audit to find exactly where you belong, but be prepared to supply the effort required to stay there.